Aaron, that was magical is the word I'm going to use for that one.
Thank you.
So powerful, so insightful into your life, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Was that about you, that poem?
Yeah, it's a bit about me, and it's kind of a bit like, I guess, using what I think my shortcomings are to kind of maybe help other people that may identify with the same shortcomings. It's just something to think about, you know. We're all distracted away from what we're trying to focus on, but letting people know I am too, you are too, we all are. But look, let's try and keep that focus.
And to do that within poetry as well.
Yeah.
That must be so hard.
It's easier than it. Do you know what it is? I think because my poetry is so much focused on just being honest, being honest and being self-reflective, it's like it comes a little bit easier because I'm actually speaking from the heart, so to speak. I know it sounds kind of like, speak from the heart, but it really is actually just that.
So would you say that most of the poems that you write then are from self, you know, from yourself, from your own experiences?
Yeah, I think it's my own experiences and also sometimes just social observations, things that I can see that are happening that I think maybe, you know what, we could actually do better. Or, do you know what, I can see that and I also suffer from that. Let me try and put something out there that maybe makes people feel a bit better or feel encouraged. And that is, I think, the main kind of, I guess, crux to a lot of my poetry that I've been doing since I've come back to poetry, because I had a break from it. But since I've come back, I'm like, you know what, let's see what I can do to give people something to, I guess, be comforted by, but also feel encouraged by.
Okay, so you said that you've come back to poetry. So how long ago did you first initially start it?
I first started poetry, well, written poetry, I probably first started around 14 years old. But my written poetry is very different to my spoken.
Okay.
But I didn't really let anybody see the written poetry for many years. Spoken poetry started after I was challenged to do it by a group who used to put together talents from different countries.
Okay.
And they said, well, look, you have a history of rap, a history of poetry, why don't you put the two together? And I was like, I don't want to, because I'm really honest with you.
Okay.
I didn't like spoken word because I thought that spoken word was like, as I walk into a room and I look at you, and I was like, I don't really like that style of poetry. But they were like, no, you can make it your own. Make it how you want it to be. You can use your own flow, create your own style. And then that kind of really made me start thinking. And so I would say maybe I was about 21 when I first started doing spoken word poetry.
So I find that really interesting that you said that your written poetry is completely different to your spoken poetry. Why are they so different? For me, I would have just thought, well, you're writing it down, so then you just speak it as you've written it.
No, because my writing poetry is written more kind of like in high English, and my spoken poetry is more phonetic. So I phonetically rhyme, so I will rhyme like words that sound the same. It's kind of more colloquial. More phonetic. So for instance, I might say something like scrapping at bay, scrapping in May. It's like phonetically it rhymes, but it sounds better than maybe it would look on paper. Does that make sense?
Ah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you mentioned as well that you used to rap.
Yeah.
I know you do loads of things. We're going to come back to all of your talents. But tell me how you kind of incorporate rap into poetry and vice versa.
Flow.
Okay.
Flow is the main way that I incorporate rap into poetry. The way I rhyme kind of more has a flow to it that's more, I guess, traditionally associated with rap than maybe it would be with poetry. But sometimes I use those dramatic pauses and like all that kind of stuff, as poets do as well. But the flow in how I rhyme is more to do with rap. But to be honest, that happened much later as well, because I think phonetic rhyming really changed the game for me when I started to realize I could have a bit more fun with it. And it doesn't need to be, because with the high English, for me, it was all grammatical, syntactical. It had to be accurate.
Right.
But then when I started doing the spoken stuff, I was like, you know, I can have fun with this. I can just make words rhyme. I can maybe put words together that wouldn't usually rhyme with something. For me, it's like, I know it sounds weird, but for me, it's like words are like one of the greatest things in the world. Like, I love taking words and almost using them like a puzzle and putting them together. And that is something that I started to do later. And then how I used to use flow when I rapped, I started to bring that into poetry, but then still keep it within the remit of a poetic style.
Okay, so clearly your poetry has evolved, but let's talk about poetry on a whole. It's really evolved from, you know, old school poetry to where we are now. We're including rap into that. How do you think that that's maybe affect poetry nowadays? How has that affected you? Do you ever go back to some of the old school kind of poetry? I know there are certain ways to rhyme things back then. I don't remember how it works, but there's like a certain term for it. Do you think that that's kind of had an effect on you?
100%.
Yeah.
One of the poets who really influenced me was Carol Ann Duffy. Carol Ann Duffy was, I believe she was from Scotland. She was the poet laureate as well for a while. And I just liked the way that, I liked the kind of schemes of rhyming that she used, like an A-B scheme. And I also liked the kind of imagery that she would create with her poetry. And to be honest, if I'm very honest, like my written style was directly influenced by Carol Ann Duffy. Look, you got a little secret,
Okay.
yeah, literally. And in regards to how poetry's evolved, I think it's evolved because I think generationally we're taking more time to like actually listen to people speak. And I think the medium of poetry kind of gives you a little edge with it. So it's like, I'm listening to you speak anyway, but with you making it creative and with you utilizing words in a way that evokes imagery and also sometimes sounds good, because if you're using a certain type of flow, some poets just sound good, like the way that they put words together. I think it's just people are more resonating with that. Like even in terms of like, you know, if you watch interviews, people watch two people sitting down doing an interview much more now than they did before. So I think people are just taking in I guess, the moment of a person conversing or speaking to you a lot more nowadays. And I think there are some poets as well who have made it more cool. People like Sully Breaks, people like George the Poet, people like even Akala, even though it's not really poetry, but he incorporates certain things in. Lionheart, one of my friends, all these guys are my friends as well. I think they've kind of helped to make it more cool, especially with some poets now putting poetry on music. Like George the Poet. It's evolving and it's cool to see.
So you've mentioned quite a few names there, all being your friends as well. Anybody else other than those and Caroline Duffy that really inspire you?
Remember Def Jam did Def Jam comedy?
Yes.
They used to do this Def Jam poetry as well.
Oh, no, I don't remember that.
And sometimes the comedians would do poems. And that was very interesting for me. And also to relate to that, Ludacris as a rapper. These people, those comedians that did those poems and Ludacris, they influenced me because they made me see that rhyming, poetry, rap can be fun. You can have fun with it. Growing up, a lot of my rhymes were just basically me evoking the pain, the pressures, the environment that was around me. A lot of, you know, I experienced a lot of crazy things growing up. But then people like Ludacris and also those poets who were comedians, they kind of showed me, well, actually, you can have fun with rhyming. You can create a fun story, or you can even make a comedic poem. And actually, I started doing a lot of comedic poetry earlier in my journey. I used to go on tour. So like you'd have like Richard Blackwood and all the rest of them doing poetry. And then I'll come into the stage, now it's poet. And the thing is, if you're a poet in a comedy show, people are already like, huh? Why is this guy here? Like, I don't want to hear a poet. So I had to kind of get them on side. And I used to have like a lot of physical, quite lewd poems that I used to perform. And yeah, it was funny. But I think I'll leave that in the past,
yeah. Okay, so hang on a second. You are, well, comedic poet as well, so I'm going to say you're a comedian. I'm putting that in there.
No.
You're a TV presenter, a producer, a documentary maker, a travel vlogger, a behaviour specialist and a mentor. How do you have time to do all of those things? And I want to know about all of it.
It's all been in the journey of my life. Coming from my background, I was very passionate when I came out of university, especially to try and address some of the issues that were happening in my community. A lot of the younger boys in my community, they were going to jail. They were like, some of them were dying, and I was like, what's going on? How come for me, seemingly got worse with the younger ones? So I set off on a journey to try and get into schools, speak to young people. That's how I ended up becoming a mentor. Okay. I joined an organization called Lives Not Knives. LNK, they're called now. They're an official charity now. They trained me up. I did a few courses. I had a degree already, but I got a diploma in dealing with challenging behavior and youth work practice and working with young people. And that is how the behaviour specialist stuff came about. But then I also started to do some projects in the summer with different organisations to work specifically with behaviour and challenging young people. then I actually started to run a unit in a school called The Brain, Behaviour Results by Addressing Issues Now. That's what I called it, Behaviour Results Addressing Issues Now, because I felt like a lot of the young people just needed to address their issues now.
Yeah.
And then that was very intensive. It was an intensive environment where these young people, I had a cohort, they were with me all day, every day, intensive environment. It was punitive, but it was also supposed to be rehabilitative. And in terms of the rest of the stuff, like I love seeing the world. And I realized that I was doing a lot of travel, but I wasn't documenting it. And so what I started to do was literally to start documenting it. So now I've got like about 11 or 12 different vlogs in like 11 or 12 different countries.
Wow.
And every time I go somewhere, I contact people before I get there and organize certain things, and I go there and just document it and just show the beauty of different places in the world, because I love it. I love showing culture, especially different cultures, and learning myself. Producing, that comes with, as you know, like just being on set, listening and learning and having ideas, and then also being able to visualize things. And that's how producing came about. And TV presenting was actually kind of like a mistake.
Oh, okay. Good mistake.
Yeah, it was a good mistake. I didn't really want to be seen. That's the funniest thing.
Oh.
Like, initially, I wanted to be a journalist.
Okay.
I didn't mind my name being seen, but my face, I didn't want it to be
You got
anywhere.
a good face.
I
You should
don't know,
embrace
man.
it.
It's debatable. Like,
I'm
it's
telling
like,
you, no more debate. You're good.
And so, yeah, I started writing for like online magazines and stuff like that. And then somebody pushed me in front of camera against my will. Like, it was actually a bit of an argument. And then it just really worked. And everyone was surprised by it. Me too, I was surprised. And then a lady that hired me for a show actually did an application for SBTV. I ended up getting called for the audition. I didn't know it was part of a TV show on Channel 4. But then I ended up winning the whole show.
Oh, wow.
And then I became a presenter, and then my first interview was with Kelly Rowland. And that went viral globally. And that was before virality was really a thing.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, whoa, it was too much for me almost. But I just decided, let's just try and learn.
Embrace it,
Yeah, let's try and learn. So every shoot, every person I interviewed was a learning experience. And then that led on to me doing more things and moving into TV. I had those social issues were still very important to me. And so I started putting that out to people. A lot of people didn't really care at first. They were like, you interview rappers, sports singers, and these type of people. Why would you care about social issues? But I did. And luckily, somebody at ITN saw my vision. And then that is how my first documentary came about. It did really, really well. And then off the back of that, I've done about 5 or 6 more productions.
Wow.
And yeah, it's been an incredible journey, man.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, so tell me about that first documentary that was clearly a big turning point for you for the rest of the documentaries that you've done.
Yeah, ITN, they had a few ideas. And they had sent me an email, and I actually thought it was spam.
Okay.
I didn't think it was for me. I was like, why are they presenting a documentary? I was like, that can't be for me. Like, do you know what I mean? So I replied to it, but I just assumed it was somebody just trying to like mess about with me. And I said to them, look, I think the idea that you've got about one-punch killers is very strong, because I had known about a few one-punch killings in my local area. And I also said a few more suggestions as well. And then I didn't hear back for a while. So I was like, oh, so it was a spam email, it was just fake. But then out of nowhere, they're like, okay, cool, we're going to production in like 2 weeks. I'm like, huh? And it's like, and I just remember thinking to myself, this could change the whole trajectory of my career.
Yeah.
So let's just try and kill it. And that's what I did. I just got so focused. So I immersed myself so much into research, so much into the subject area. And then the show ended up getting promoted to Channel 5. It was supposed to be on 5 Star. And then the show became the second highest viewed show on the channel. Like, the only thing that beat it was Celebrity Big Brother, obviously.
No way.
You know what I mean, yeah. And so, yeah, changed everything. And then from there, now the conversations were different. Okay, so what are we doing next? And then I've just been doing some really powerful, hard-hitting documentaries about some really difficult and hard issues in society.
So you mentioned One Punch Killer being your first big documentary, or documentary full stop. Do you think that is your career highlight to date?
Yeah. Do you know what, it is, because it was like a culmination of everything that I had been trying to work towards. When I first started to have meetings to talk about documentary ideas, people didn't really understand why. Like, it was kind of like, not laughed off, but it was kind of just like confused as to why I'd want to do that. So you know, when I joined the Sky One show that I did, the first thing that I said to them is that, you know, I do a lot of that stuff as well, but I really want to start covering some socio-political and current affair issues. And they were like, yeah. And they threw me in the mix of that. And so I felt like that kind of helped to lead to the point where I got to, where One Punch Killers came. So when it actually happened, and I remember I did like a night where I invited people to come and watch it. And I remember like it was in so many magazines, like it was in numerous, like I remember I go to the shop and it's like I'll turn to like, and I see a picture of me and one of the ladies, the old ladies that I was talking to, and it's just like, this is amazing, it's happening. People sent me like cards with the picture that was being used as the promotion. I was just like, whoa, this is really happening. I'm always a person to, I guess I don't really take it in completely. I'm just like, I get overwhelmed by it, but I'm just like, okay, let's get to work kind of thing. Yeah. But yeah, when I think about it now, it's like, I remember even on the night when I did the invite screening, I actually spoke after, and I remember I nearly broke and cried, like, but I managed to get my inner thug back, and I balanced myself out. But I think that was just a testament to how much emotion I felt on that night with it coming out, and with what I thought was a very powerful documentary. And I got to incorporate spoken word into it as well.
Oh, wow.
If you watch it, you see there's a spoken word piece where I speak a bit about my background, speaking about how we just didn't really get fazed by violence, but then finishing with, but do you realize how detrimental violence is? And yeah, so proud. Like, it's just, it's amazing that they even allowed me to do that. Like, I was thinking, are you sure you want me to do a poem? They're like, yeah. I'm like, all right.
But you have to bring a bit of you into it, though, don't you? It's important. And we have mentioned spoken word, poetry. We've spoken about both of those. Do you think there's a big difference between the two? You know, high poetry, spoken word, having something like that on a show like that. What do you think the difference is between the two of them?
There's a definite difference. For me, as a creative, personally, there's a massive difference. I think initially, I started writing the high English poetry to kind of, like, as a statement. It was like, okay, because I remember reading a lot of poetry and I was like, oh, everyone seems to come from very affluent or quite upper class backgrounds. I was like, well, look, I'm from the hood. Like, I'm from the streets, and it's like, I love words as well. So I think me writing the high English poetry was almost to say, like, well, look, let's break down all those conventions, and let me show that I can write at a similar level, maybe not the same, but a similar level to them. And
Which is different, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a different level.
And also, what I realised is, when I wrote the high English poetry, I think thinking about it now, I had a lot of issues as a young person. I was very angry. I think hence why I went into the behaviour specialising thing, because when I was young, I had a lot of behaviour issues. I was suspended from most classes. I wasn't even allowed in classes a lot in school. Yeah, I was angry. Like, I was an angry young man. And I feel like when I started writing the high English poetry, the level of language that I could use allowed me to mask what I was really saying. So even, for instance, I had a poem called Toilet. And Toilet wasn't about a toilet at all. But if you read it, on initial read, you'd be like, oh, he's talking about a toilet, and kind of making it like personified, but it's not, it's much deeper than that. Wow. And that's what poetry allowed me to have that depth when I wrote in high English, that maybe I could use to express my emotional release. And I knew, I got it out. You might not know, but I've got it out now.
You know.
And the difference between spoken word, so I don't want to try and talk down spoken word, because I think spoken word is also very powerful and can also really utilize some amazing language techniques as well. But on a personal level, I just feel like it allows me to communicate on a lot more colloquial level.
Right.
Like, I think of my spoken word in a way where I want everybody to understand it. And so what I create is something that should be universally understood as well. And for me, that's the difference.
Wow. You did mention as well that you had quite a few poems that initially you just wouldn't let anybody hear.
Yeah.
Why was that?
At the time, at that age 14, I had a crew. We used to spit together, we would rap together. And also where I'm from, very hard area, a lot of hardened characters around me. I just didn't see how this flourishing English language of a poem would really relate to the mandem. And I remember as well, sometimes when I would write my bars, my lyrics, sometimes some of that Shakespearean tongue kind of came in a little bit. And I had to kind of rewrite that. I was like, whoa, like, it's getting a bit too, do you know what I mean? And it's like, the main thing is I felt like it wouldn't be accepted, or it wouldn't be, because I remember even sometimes when we'd have like little conversations and I would correct people about something, like I could see how people kind of agree. Like, they'd be like, oh, how do you know that? And it's like, it's almost like, how do you know that? You shouldn't know that.
Right.
And so I played down a lot of my intelligence, and therefore I played down my creativity as well, as to not, I guess, impose on people and make people feel inadequate.
Wow.
So I kept the poetry secret for over 4 years, maybe 4 or 5 years. Like I would write it and then I just kind of like, I had like a little file or a USB that I used to save them onto. Hide that USB, because you can't let anybody see that. And then I went to university, and I was just around so many intellectuals. For the first time in my life, I was around people that I was like, oh, you're probably better. You're probably more intelligent than me. Like, you're probably like, I was just like, this is amazing. I'm around all these crazy intellects, and I was like, I can actually express my intellectuality. You know what I mean? And I was like, cool. Well, do you know what? I actually write poems. They're like, poems? I was like, yeah. And then a lot of people didn't believe it was my poetry. Wow. Like friends as well. When I started to kind of like slowly let some of my friends see, they were like, well, you wrote that. I'm like, no, you never wrote that. I'm like, no, I wrote that.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't believe I wrote it. Because of just the language that was used and how I was expressing myself. Like saying stuff like, one must find a way. You know what I mean? It's like, people didn't realize it. And, but I didn't care anymore. I realized that it's okay to be, it's cool to be intelligent.
Yeah.
And that was a massive shift for me as a person and as a creative.
Wow. And that set you on your journey?
Definitely.
All right, okay, now listen, that is pretty much what we've got time for, but 2 things before we go. One, I want to read to you my poem. Roses are red, violets are blue. I smell beautiful. You smell like...
That's rude. And the thing is, I kind of do as well.
No, you smell like shampoo.
Oh, shampoo.
Yeah, you know when you just freshly done your hair, smells really nice.
Shampoo.
Yeah?
That was good. That was good.
Thank you very much.
I like that.
Okay,
that was good.
So
Shampoo.
time for quick fire round.
Let's do it.
Are you ready?
Yes, go.
First one that comes to mind, you just go. Popcorn, salted or sweet?
Sweet.
Beach or city break?
Beach.
Tuxedo or tracksuit?
Oh, tracksuit.
Favourite football team?
Manchester United.
Dermot O'Leary or Davinia McCall?
Oh, Dermot O'Leary. Oh, that's hard though.
Oh, Nando's or McDonald's?
Oh, Nando's.
Poetry or presenting?
Oh. Oh, you can't ask me that.
Poetry or presenting?
Oh my gosh.
Quick.
Presenting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, that is that. Listen, before we go, just quickly tell us what is next for you.
At the moment, coming to the end of filming for the Sky One series that I do, What's Up TV, that will be out 2019, early 2019. I also have another documentary called To Catch a Criminal, which is about cybercrime, sextortion, revenge porn. I get hacked by a hacker in the show. Oh. Yeah, it's crazy. And that should be out very soon as well. I'm not too sure when though, within the next couple of months. All
right, so listen, tell everybody out there where they can find out more about you so they can keep an eye on all your stuff.
Aaron Roach Bridgeman on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. My name, Aaron Roach Bridgeman. You'll find me.
All right, that is all we've got time for this week. But thank you so much for being on the couch again, Aaron. Make sure you tune in next week when we'll have somebody else talking to me about them and their talent. I'll see you then.